Hi everyone, it's Benitez here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's WTF episode, I'm going to show you how you can build business process flows like a pro. I presented 2 sessions at the Microsoft Power Platform Conference in 2023, and one of them was summarizing business process flows to help you get started, which I'll cover in this WTF episode. The following is what I'm going to go through, so let's first learn what is a business process flow. It's a visual user interface and model-driven apps to guide users in understanding the steps to complete for an organization process. This ensures the same steps are followed by users each time. Let's take a closer look at the different elements. Each business process flow will be associated with a primary table and Dataverse. In this example, this business process flow is associated to the ideas table in Dataverse. Next, there's stages. Think of stages as a phase or a way to categorize the different parts of your process. The first stage will always be linked to the primary table by default. Now for every stage, there are steps. These steps are columns from the Dataverse table the stage is associated to. These steps can be made mandatory, and the behavior of them can be changed by using business rules, such as making a step read-only based on logic. Now let's learn how to create a business process flow. All business process flows are created within a solution. In a solution, click New, head to Automation, then Process, and select Business Process Flow. Enter a name for the business process flow. Select a Dataverse table as the primary table the business process flow is associated with, and then click Create. You'll see this prompt appear to let you know that once the business process flow is created, the solution will refresh and your newly created business process flow will be displayed. Here's a business process flow, and when I click on the ellipsis, there's an option to edit the business process flow, which I'll select. The Business Process Flow Designer will load next, and you can enter a description for the business process flow by clicking on the expand icon next to the name. Entering a description helps users and makers understand the purpose of the business process flow. Click Save to save the business process flow. Next, we're going to define the first stage in the business process flow by entering a name. The category can be populated or left blank. If you populate it, it can be useful when you want to do some reporting. I'll keep it blank for this episode and will show you how to apply a business rule later. I'll finally click on Apply and the stage is ready for the steps to be added to it. Let's next add steps to the business process flow stage. I'll click on Details and I'll select the first step. I'll enter a name and select a column from the Dataverse table that will represent the step. We then have the option to make the step required or not required for the user. Lastly, I'll select Apply, and that's how you define a step. To add another step into the stage, click on Add and select Add Data Step under Composition. Then click on the plus icon inside of the stage to add the new step. Enter a name, select the column from the Dataverse table, then decide whether it's going to be a required field or not. Then click Apply. To add another stage, after you've defined your first stage, click Add and then click on the plus icon next to the first stage, and a new stage will be added. Repeat the same process for defining the stage, followed by adding steps to the new stage. You can also have a multi-table business process flow where you can add secondary Dataverse tables to stages. This will be a different table to the primary table the business process flow is associated with, but is related to the primary table. This relationship from the secondary Dataverse table to the primary table is what we call a one-to-many relationship. For example, in this stage, I'll select the team project table for the entity of the stage. The column that represents the one-to-many relationship is the originating idea column, which displays in the relationship field. If I select this column, I'm enabling the user to link the project team row to a parent row from the ideas table. This is handy when I want to move back from a project team stage to an idea stage. If I select the relationship field as none, it means each time a user moves from an idea stage to a stage that's associated to the secondary table of project team, they are required to create a new project team row each time. For this episode, I'll select the originating idea column in the relationship field to allow the user to go back to the previous idea stage, and when they move on to the next stage that's related to the project team, they can reselect the row they previously created or linked the idea to. Other things you can do in the business process flow is add a condition. Conditions are if-else logic in a business process flow. To add a condition, click on Add and select Add Condition. To place the logical condition in the business process flow, click on the plus icon after business process flow stage. Then define the logic for the condition. For this episode, I'll configure the if part of the condition to check whether the project is funded. I'll enter a name for the condition, then I'll select the column. The operator can remain as equals and the type can remain as value. For the value, I'll select yes and select apply. The if part of the condition is now defined. To define the if-else part of the condition, we can link the condition to an existing stage. To do this, select the condition and click on connector. Click disconnect. Then reselect the condition and select connect. Notice how the other stages downstream in the business process flow are highlighted in yellow. This indicates that these stages can be selected for the if-else part of the condition. I'll select the close stage and the if-else condition is now defined for the condition. You can save and activate the business process flow. Now, if you want to add business rules to the business process flow, you can do it directly from the designer. You select a stage and a new window will appear. Click on the new icon and the business rule designer will appear. Now let's say we want to make the percentage complete field show as business required when the complete proposal field equals yes. I'll enter a name followed by a description. Select the condition and enter a name. The entity will remain as the idea dataverse table and the source will remain as the entity. I'll select the complete proposal field in the field dropdown, and for the operator, it will remain as equals. The type will remain as value, and I'll select the yes checkbox as a value. And lastly, I'll click apply. Next, I'll add an action of set business required and click on the plus icon. I'll then enter a display name and select the percentage complete field in the dropdown. In the next dropdown, I'll change it to business required and click apply. Now we do the opposite for the if-else condition. I'll click add, then click on the plus icon for the if-else condition and add the set business required action. Enter a name and select the percentage complete field and click apply. You can also configure the scope of the business rule and there are 3 to choose from. The first one is entity, which means it will run on server side where a user does not need to be in the model-driven app form for it to take effect. Next, there's all forms, where the business rule will run on all forms for the table and the user is required to be in the model-driven app form. Lastly, there's a specific form, so in my use case, we see the information form. And if selected, it will only run on this form. In my blog post, you'll find several links to more information on business rule scope and what to be aware of, so check it out when you can. Finally, click Save and activate the business rule. Exit out of the business rule designer and you'll see the business rule has been created. With the business process flow already activated, click the update button and the business process flow will be updated with the business rule. You can also select which security roles can access the business process flow. Select Edit Security Roles and then select the relevant security roles for the business process flow. Navigate to the Business Process Flows tab and enable the organization access level for all privileges, or you can choose to not enable some of them, but at minimum it will need create, read, write, append, and append to. Click Save and Close to update the security role and exit from the other window that lists the security roles. Okay, now that you know how to create a business process flow, let's add some automation to it. You can execute a cloud flow from any stage in the business process flow. What I'll show is how you can send a message from the business process flow stage by entering a comment as the message, and in Microsoft Teams, a PowerApps card will be sent to a channel. Create a cloud flow in the same solution and the trigger to select is instant. Enter a name for the cloud flow and select the Dataverse trigger of when a flow step is run from a business process flow, then click Create. Quick note here, as of right now, when this WTF episode is filmed, the new flow designer does not support the Dataverse trigger of when a flow step is run from a business process flow, so I won't be building in the new flow designer. Okay, so for the trigger, add an input. I'll select text as an input to prompt the user to enter a comment. For the next step, I'll select the Dataverse action of get a row by ID. I'll rename the action, and for the table, I'll select the ideas table. For the row ID, we'll reference a dynamic content value from the trigger, the BPF flow stage table row ID. This is the GUID of the IDs table the cloud flow is triggered from through the stage in the business process flow. To optimize the flow run, I'll only display the columns I want, which is the name of the idea score, and the risk score. I'll then add the create card instance action from the cards for PowerApps connector. If you want to learn how to create PowerApps cards, Watch my previous episode. I'll select the card that will be posted in a Microsoft Teams channel. For the message from BPF input value, I'll select the dynamic content of comment from the trigger. Next, I'll populate the variables of the PowerApps card by selecting the dynamic content of good from the previous action that retrieves the ideas row, followed by the idea name, idea score, and risk score dynamic content values. Next, I'll select the post card in a chat or channel from the Microsoft Teams connector. I'll post as PowerApps and post in channel. Next, I'll select the Teams group followed by the channel to post the card to. Lastly, I'll select the dynamic content of card from the PowerApps card action. The last action in my cloud flow is to update the process log table that contains the run details of the workflow that was triggered in the stage of the business process flow. Select the flow's workflow log ID from the trigger and select the status of succeeded. This will now update the status to succeeded, which will be visible in the business process flow stage once the cloud flow run completes. Next, we'll learn about using classic workflows to display an error message on exit of a business process flow stage. Classic workflows is the original built-in low-code automation of Dynamics 365 and Dataverse. As you don't need to know functions, it's simply click and select. As an example, I'll display an error message if the user tries to move on to the next business process flow stage when the percentage complete is equal to or less than 79. In the same solution, select Workflow under Automation. Enter a name and select the Ideas Dataverse table. We're going to create the classic workflow from scratch, so leave it as blank and click Create. Pick the As an On-Demand Process checkbox. This is so that we can run the classic workflow from the business process flow stage. Change the scope from user to organization to allow any user to be able to trigger the classic workflow. Uncheck the tick box where record is created, as the classic workflow will be executed on demand. We'll add a condition by selecting the row in the designer, followed by clicking on Add Step and select Check Condition. You'll be prompted to enter a description. You can then define your condition by clicking on the hyperlink within the condition. Here, you can select Table, which is Idea. Then you select the column, which in this use case is percentage complete. Select the operator of is less than or equal to and enter a value of 79. I'm going to add another condition where we check if the column is not populated, as we don't want the user to progress if they have left this step in the business process flow stage blank. This logic will be OR, where we check if either condition is met. So we select both rows and the group OR action, then click Save and Close. Now to display an error message to the user, we can use a cancel workflow step. Select the row in the designer under the condition and click on Add Step. Then select Stop Workflow. Enter a description and then change the status from succeeded to cancelled and click on Set Properties. In the value field, enter the message to display to the user. Next, we'll add an if-else condition so that the user can proceed to the next stage in the business process flow when the percentage complete column value is greater than or equal to 80. In the designer, select the entire row of the condition, then click on Add Step and select the conditional branch workflow step. Click on the condition hyperlink and select the idea table, followed by the percentage complete column, and this time for the operator, select is greater than or equal to. Enter the value of 80 and click Save and Close. We'll repeat the previous process of adding a stop workflow step, enter a description, and leave the status as succeeded, as we're not displaying an error message this time round. Finally, click the Save button and activate the classic workflow. The classic workflow will now be activated and will also appear inside the solution when you exit from the classic workflow. With the Cloudflow and Classic Workflow built, they can now be added to the business process flow stage. In the business process flow, select Add Flow Step to associate the Cloudflow to it. Then select the plus icon in the stage of where the flow step is to be added to. Enter a name, and you also have the option to make the flow step required if needed. Select the Cloudflow in the lookup field and then click Apply. The Cloudflow is now added to the stage in the business process flow as a flow step. To add the classic workflow, it's the same where you select the stage, click Add, and select Add Workflow. In the Trigger drop-down field, select Stage Exit and then select the classic workflow in the lookup field. The display name will automatically be populated with the name of the classic workflow. Click Apply and the workflow step is added to the business process flow stage. Okay, now that we've built the business process flow and we've added automation to it, I'll next show you the business process flow in action. So I'm in my Innovation Challenge Model Driven app and I have an idea open up on screen. Now, as you can see at the top here, we have the business process flow, and when I click on the create stage, we'll see the steps associated to the stage, and in one of those steps is the cloud flow step that we can execute directly from the business process flow. So I'm going to click on the run flow button. This will now have a dialog pop up where I can enter a comment, which will be the message that's posted to the Teams channel through the PowerApps card. So I'll enter in a comment. And I'll select the run flow button. And then behind the scenes, the cloud flow will be executed. When I click on done, we'll see that the state of the flow is processing. When I refresh this model driven app form, we'll then see the state change to succeeded. So I'll click on refresh and I'll go back to the create business process flow stage, and we can see that the state is now succeeded. This is due to that last action that we had in the cloud flow that is updating the process log for the business process flow stage when you're executing a cloud flow as a step from the business process flow. All right, so I'll head over to Microsoft Teams, and in the channel, we can see the PowerApps card has been posted. Now, if the PowerApps card hasn't automatically loaded, you have the ability to click on Load Card, and that will go ahead and load the PowerApps card for you. I'll click on the See More hyperlink, and here I can click on the View Idea button in the PowerApps card, and that will be the end user experience. If anyone selects that button from the PowerApps card in Microsoft Teams, it will direct them to the idea. Sorry, just pause it. It will direct them to the idea record in the model driven app. So if we continue down the business process flow, I'm going to hit next stage and I'll show you that business rule that we configured in action. So if you remember, when the complete proposal field is updated to yes, it will make the percentage complete field below mandatory. So here we go, it's now showing as business required. Now the next thing that we'll see in action is that classic workflow that's going to display the error message to the end user if this field is left blank or the value is equal to or less than 79. So now if I enter in 65 and then I try and select next stage, we're going to see that error message display. I'm now going to update it to, let's say, 85, and I'll update the next step to yes, and that error message will no longer appear, and that's because of that conditional branch step that we added in the classic workflow. So the next thing we'll see in action is the conditional logic of the business process flow. So if you remember, we had a condition where if the fund project equals yes, then show the next business process flow stage, which is initiate project. Otherwise, if it equals no, then go straight to close. So what I'll do is update this field to yes, and then we'll see those two business process flow stages appear. Now, the next thing that I'll show you in action is that relationship that we configured earlier between the idea Dataverse table and another secondary table through the one-to-many relationship. So the secondary Dataverse table that I selected earlier was project team, and that was through the originating idea column in the project team. So now when I click on next stage, I'll be prompted to create a new project team. So I'll just enter in a project team name and give it a description. I'll just enter in some sample data and click save and close. This will then move from the score business process flow stage, which was associated to the primary table of idea, to the initiate project business process flow stage, which is associated to a secondary table called team project. And so now we're being displayed the team project model driven app form. So now just to continue with the end user process so you can see what it's like end to end, I'm just gonna once again enter some sample data and go ahead to the next stage. So this is the second to last stage, and I'll enter in some sample data again. And then finally, we'll be presented with the final stage, which is the close stage of the business process flow. Now, once a user completes all steps in the business process flow and they click on finish, the state will be updated to finished, and we'll also see the business process flow update to completed. And that is how you build business process flows like a pro in Dataverse. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!
Turn up. Let's go.